All right, so do keep your hymnals open as we learn about and talk about this truly classic great hymn. So first, let's see how much you remember about kind of reading the fine print of hymns. Who wrote this hymn?
Stuart K.
That's right, Stuart K. Hine. Apparently he was an Englishman. I looked up a picture, lovely chap, Stuart K. Hine. What is the name of the tune of this hymn? Oh, store good. That sounds weird. But don't worry, we will talk about it and we will learn what that means. So, yes, Stuart Hine is the hymn writer. This hymn is the only one in our hymnal written by Stuart Hine, even though he did write many other hymns, but perhaps since he was English, maybe his other hymns are more well known in England. But this is the only one of his that we have in our hymnals. If you look up How Great Thou Art in some other hymnals, they might note that the music actually comes from a traditional Swedish folk tune that Stuart Hine adapted. The newer Green Baptist hymnal that we use in the sanctuary, it calls the tune How Great Thou Art, because the O Store Good was kind of a previous version that Stuart Hine arranged and adapted. And so in different hymnals, you might find a little different information. Okay, so here's the backstory of where this hymn came from. And there's a lot to it. It's really quite neat. So you'll pardon me while I kind of download this really neat story to you. So the story of this hymn starts 150 years ago in Sweden with a Swedish minister and hymn writer named Carl Boberg. And in other hymnals, when you look up this hymn, it might say, it might have Carl Boberg's name as well as Stuart Hine's name. So Carl Boberg was a very popular preacher in Sweden in the 1800s. He also wrote many hymns. Later in life, into the 1900s, he was elected to the Swedish Parliament, actually. It was the year 1885 that he wrote a poem that he titled in Swedish, O Store Gud, which apparently means, O Great God. So, that tune name in the bottle of our white 1991 Baptist hymnal, O Store Good, that's the original title, the original poem that Carl Boberg wrote in Swedish, and it means, O Great God. So here's how he wrote this poem. One summer afternoon, because he was a minister who spoke at a lot of churches, he was walking back home after worshiping in a nearby village. And he said that because it was the summer, all of creation seemed to be in its richest coloring, and the birds were singing everywhere. The earth was alive. It was very warm. But then he said a storm appeared on the horizon. Soon there was thunder and lightning, so he had to hurry and find shelter in this storm. But soon after, the storm was over and the clear sky appeared. When he came home, he opened his window towards the sea. Apparently there had been a funeral in his village, and the church bells were ringing. So that evening is when he wrote his poem. Originally, it had 9 stanzas, and here's how it started in English. When I consider the world, which thou hath made by thine almighty word, and how the web of life thy wisdom guideth, and all creation feedeth at thy board, then doth my soul burst forth in song of praise. O great God, O great God. So can you hear some similarities, some familiar kind of ideas, some even exact words that you can tell, okay, this is the kind of original poem that eventually we will get to the hymn that we know and sing. So, Carl Boberg publishes that poem that he wrote in Swedish, O store good, O great God, and it seemed to be forgotten. He wrote a poem and he published it, and he thought that it was kind of forgotten to the world. But years later, he heard his poem being sung to the tune of an old Swedish folk melody, and he thought, hey, that sounds really good. He liked the combination of his words and that tune. And remember, as we've talked about the history of hymns, oftentimes the words were over here and the tunes were over here, and sometimes these words and tunes would come together, or they'd come apart, or other words and tunes would come together and come apart. So he liked the combination of his hymn, his poem, O Great God, with this Swedish folk melody. So he published them together in a Swedish hymnal in 1891. Okay, fast forward ahead 16 years. That hymn is starting to get traction and get used in Swedish. It's picked up by a German hymn writer who translates it from Swedish into German in 1907. And then a Russian minister and hymn writer discovers it in German, translates it then into Russian in 1912, and then he starts reprinting it in the hymnals that he puts together. And remember, in the early days of hymnals and hymn publishing, it's kind of like if you were a hymn writer, you would often just put out your own hymnal, or a big church or a big pastor. There was a lot of kind of personal hymnals being published. And so this Russian minister and hymn writer starts printing this Boberg hymn in hymnals that are in Russian that also start rising in popularity. So it's the words of Boberg's poem from Swedish into German, then into Russian, paired with this old Swedish folk melody, and it really starts rising in popularity. Okay, so that was in like 1912, the 19-teens. Fast forward then into the 1930s, there was a missionary from England named Stuart Hine, who had been assigned to serve as a missionary in Western Russia at the time. Now, that area where he was serving, there's multiple countries there in Eastern Europe. Mostly he was in what we know as Ukraine and Romania. So this missionary, Stuart Hine, he wasn't even born when Carl Boberg first published the original version of the hymn. But while Stuart Hine is there in Eastern Europe serving as a missionary, he hears this hymn being sung in Russian. And that was kind of the predominant language there in Eastern Europe at the time. So Stuart Hine hears this hymn, is really moved, and decides that he will translate it into English. He adjusts some of the focus, some of the wording, some of the organization, and he adapts the melody. He said that the first three stanzas of this hymn were inspired by his mission work in the Carpathian Mountains of Eastern Europe, which stretch through Romania, Slovakia, and other Eastern European countries. So feel free to look at the stanzas of this hymn. Stuart Hine said he composed he kind of translated and assembled the first verse when he was caught in a thunderstorm in those Carpathian Mountains, and he had to rush and find shelter in a village one night. Sound familiar? The second verse he translated and put together when he was in a beautiful forest on the Romanian border and he heard birds chirping and children singing. Then he said the third verse, he translated, put together, as he was seeing many people from those mountain villages decide to follow Jesus in the mission work that he was doing. Then when World War II breaks out, he leaves Eastern Europe, goes back to England, and that's when he translates the fourth stanza. In 1948, his mission work there back home is to help and serve refugees from Eastern Europe because he could speak the language. They had fled for safety, and so he was helping them assimilate, incorporate in England, and find homes, and hearing their terrible stories that they had to flee as refugees. So he was thinking a lot about that idea of home, and he wrote the fourth stanza and thinking about what our ultimate eternal home is. So with all those stanzas translated and written, the hymn as we know it was finally printed in 1949. That's how the hymn that we see when we open our hymnals got put together. That's quite a wild story. I mean, it goes through 4 languages up to that point, and the story's not yet done because that was mostly in England. So Stuart Hine starts putting out leaflets with this new hymn that he's put together. He includes an English and a Russian translation because he first heard the previous version in Russia. And because he was a missionary still, before then, and still was a missionary, he knew a lot of missionary contacts, and so he just sent out this new hymn that he had put together to all his missionary contacts, and it went around the world and was really widely used and was very popular in missionary settings. So in 1954, there was a Billy Graham crusade in London, and one of those leaflets with this now finished hymn was given to George Beverly Shea. And if you're familiar with George Beverly Shea, he was the music director of most of the Billy Graham crusades. So the music that was sung and performed all over the world, all the crusades, George Beverly Shea was the go-to music minister, choir director of all those Billy Graham crusades. But George Beverly Shea said that he often got those kinds of, what's it called? Solicitations. He got that a lot because he would go around the world and someone would say, "Oh, Mr. Beverly Shea, I'd like to show you my new hymn. It's really good." And so he admitted when he first got this leaflet, he didn't look at it. He just put it in his pocket. Because I'm sure he was busy trying to organize this massive crusade in London. But even though he didn't read it in the moment, he did notice it was interesting. It came in both English and Russian, and it had a really strong title, "How Great Thou Art." So we assume that somehow in the translation process from Swedish, O store Gud, to German, to Russian, to English, Stuart Hine had drafted that as the title, "How Great Thou Art." So eventually, when George Beverly Shea has some downtime, he pulls the leaflet back out of his coat and says, "Let me see what this hymn is all about." He starts singing it to himself, really likes it. He shows it to the other members of the Billy Graham team. They all really like it too, so they decide to use it at their next crusade the following year in Toronto, and from then on, they used it every single time. Without fail, George Beverly Shea said it was one of the most popular demanded hymns that they would sing during the crusades, that they would just sing it over and over and over again. So after that, that's how it became beloved in the U.S. and spread across our country, kind of made the jump from England to the U.S., and that's how it came to be in our Baptist hymnals after that. So that's a pretty amazing journey, I think. What do you make of that story? What do you hear that stood out to you in the story of this hymn? What did you note? Interesting parts.
Up until this study, I just assumed this song was a more current one, because we sing it so much, I didn't realize the age to it.
Yeah. This version would be current to 1949, and then we heard in the U.S. it came to the U.S. in the 50s, so it's kind of current-ish to us. But you know, if we were missionaries who spoke Russian or German or Swedish, we might have heard about it over 100 years ago. Yeah.
Are these the only 4 verses in English?
As far as I know, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's the difference between the, 1899 that's listed as the year in the, next to Stuart?
Oh, that would be the year that Stuart Hine was born.
Okay.
So he was born in 1899, and when this hymnal was published in 1991, he was still living. I think he died in the 2000s or something.
This says he died in 1989.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I wonder, so this hymnal was published in 91. They probably had to start that process multiple years prior. And so I can believe that, you know, news, the obituary news hadn't yet reached what the
They could
publisher.
go back and fix it.
Yeah. But if you open our green hymnals upstairs, because they are newer, they do have Stuart Hine's death year. And I think in our newer Green Baptist hymnals, Celebrating Grace, instead of putting the author or composer's lifespan years, in this hymnal, it puts lifespan years, like you can see on the next page when those people were born and died. Our newer hymnals, they try to put the year that the hymn was written. Mm-hmm. Either the words for the words writer or the music for the music writer. So that's why I said Carl Boberg wrote down originally the words in Swedish in 1885. So Stuart Hine had not yet been born. And in Sweden, no less.
But looking at the history, how many opportunities did this hymn take to be just fallen by the wayside?
Yeah.
Yet it kept being renewed.
Yeah.
God had to have had his hand in this.
Yeah. It shows how special, how good, how deep this hymn, the mission it was meant for. Because like we talked about last week with Fanny Crosby, she wrote 8,000 hymns, and the majority of them aren't known. We know dozens, but there were a lot of hymns being written in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And yeah, at every juncture, it could have just stayed a lovely poem in Swedish, or it could have stayed a lovely hymn in Swedish with an old Swedish folk melody, or it could have stayed a lovely hymn in German, or it could have stayed a lovely hymn in Russian, or it could have stayed a lovely hymn just in England. But I wonder if, because it was so much connected to missionaries, like the missionary movement, like the missionary web of connection, and it really became popular and well known through that evangelistic work originally, like in countries all over the world. Like it would pop up in India and translated in other different languages. And then when George Beverly Shea founded like their crusade ministry. So it really is tied, its story is tied to evangelism and mission work. And it was that effort that just kept picking it up and kept finding it. Mm-hmm.
Of all the music that Elvis Presley did,
Go on.
he never won a Grammy Award for any of his rock and roll music.
Really?
He won 3 for his gospel music. 2 of them were for How Great Thou Art.
Oh, wow. So Elvis didn't win any like rock and roll Grammys,
I
but
think he only won for his gospel music. And How Great Thou Art, according, I've heard this before, but according to this, He won one in 1967 and another one in '74 for singing How Great Thou Art. Then He Touched Me was another song he won a Grammy for.
Fascinating. Fascinating. That's fascinating. That is great trivia. Elvis won Grammys, but only for religious gospel songs like this one. I thought it was fascinating to hear that the original poem in Swedish was written by a minister caught in a thunderstorm, and then when the minister, the English minister, was caught in a thunderstorm, that's when he was inspired. So I wonder, like, which came first? Maybe he heard the hymn first, and then he was caught in a thunderstorm. But it's so remarkable that there's something about like the storms of life, and yet sunlight at the end of the storm. Yeah.
To me, I guess the universal appeal is the refrain.
Oh,
And it stands alone.
Yeah.
The verses are kind of there,
Mm-hmm.
but that melody is not like any other.
Yeah.
And it's
So
very recognizable.
powerful.
And it's repetitive.
yeah,
Sings my soul, how great thou art, how great thou art,
yeah,
and it seems to be more universal because of the refrain.
yeah, yeah,
And that matches the scripture that is referenced to.
I wonder, because it's so universal in its message, that's why any missionary of any denomination could use it, because the message of this hymn is just so powerful in its simplicity. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, how great thou art. Like, boom, it's kind of like the John 3:16 version of a hymn. It's just how great thou art. That's it. It's just perfect in its simplicity. Does anyone remember, maybe as it was spreading in popularity here back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s? I didn't know if anybody had any memories of early days or the catching on. Sometimes I can remember if there's kind of a newish song, I go, I remember where I first was when I heard that song. I don't know if anyone else, has any memories of those, because it is, for our shores, very recent, compared to some of these hymns are 500 years old or more.
I think George Beverly Shea's version and Elvis's version really helped put it on the map.
Yeah, big time.
Because it really got known
Yeah,
when they were doing it, and they did fabulous jobs with it.
yeah,
I think for performers singing that, it's a hard song to sing. It's got a pretty good range to it.
yeah, yeah. Especially at the end,
Yeah.
that high E, how great thou art. Yeah, yeah. And you're right, that did kick it like into total, like the next level of how many people heard the song is all the Crusades and Elvis, and it just got such widespread. And then once anybody heard it, I think they naturally just could feel the power of it. Yeah.
When I was a child,
Mhm.
the Graham Crusades, the Billy Graham Crusades were on TV with great regularity.
Oh, good.
So this George Beverly Shea singing this song on TV was very common to my young, I can remember when it came out.
Yeah.
And as you said, he always sang this song.
Yeah,
at Crusades.
yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. So you didn't have to just be in New York or something.
No.
Or Chicago at a
it
big
was
crusade.
on TV, on the Billy Graham Crusade.
Good.
And if the Billy Graham was on crusade, was on TV, we were in the living room watching that little black and white TV.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Bill Graham did a crusade in Asheville in the late 50s,
Ah.
and I remember going to it. I don't remember whether George Beverly Shea sang this, but I remember,
Bill, I think that it was later than the fifties.
no, it was in the 50s.
Well, I
He did
don't
one in
know.
he did one in the 60s as
Oh, I
well.
was gonna say, well,
He
it
did,
wasn't in the fifties.
I think he did one in '63,
the weekend that John Kennedy was assassinated.
Oh, really?
Yes.
He did one in the seventies, I worked in that crusade,
Oh, wow.
and,
That's
in
the one I went to,
Mm.
70s, cause I
it's
was.
amazing, these crusades were amazing.
Yeah, I'm sure there was a lot of music sung, and it's a pretty safe, good bet that this was one of the hymns that was sung. Yeah. Did you notice that there were 2 asterisks in the words?
Yes.
Mhm. So you can look down for each of those. So the first one is, consider all the worlds thy hands have made. It says, author's original words are, consider all the works thy hands
That's
have
how I
made.
remember it,
What?
works, yeah.
Interesting.
I think that that's how my mother, that we had it, my mother had all kinds of music from crusades and stuff, and so I think it was works in one of her books.
That's very interesting, because in the hymnal before this, 1975, it had worlds. And then it wasn't in the Baptist hymnal before that, because the one before that was 1956 and hadn't quite caught on. So I was wondering, well, how did you hear that? And you said your mom had a lot of different music
Well,
from around.
and she would, if she went to a crusade, or she bought music from everybody.
There you go.
Yeah,
There
so
you
she
go.
had like, she could play the piano.
Yeah.
Unlike her children, but,
So it had been those other sources that had the original
I'll have to
words.
go home and see if we have it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
piano bench.
Yeah, because the Baptist hymnal before this also had the changed words.
I think.
Mhm. And so I hear the rolling thunder instead of I hear the mighty thunder.
I don't remember.
So kind of interesting that of all the original Stuart Hine words, those 2 were changed. So those 2 word changes happened when the hymn was published, like in its first popular American hymnal release in 1955, before it got into the widespread Baptist hymnals. So those 2 word changes, apparently George Beverly Shea liked the changes because he thought the words were more descriptive and they sung better. So those were his preference to sing. Also, apparently, Stuart Hine did not like the changes at first, since the publishing company changed his words without talking to him. But eventually, he accepted the changes, since this is the version that became the most popular. And so I guess if everybody is loving your hymn with these words, you'll be okay with it. So what do you think of these 2 word changes? Do you like these 2 word changes, or do you think the publishers should not have changed them? Or both? You like the changes, but they shouldn't have changed Stuart's original words. What do you think?
I like Rolling Thunder.
Rolling Thunder.
Better than Mighty, but I think,
Works, worlds.
would have been fine, the
Mhm.
words.
Yeah,
It doesn't really change the meaning, I don't think, at all.
yeah, not that much. Yeah, it's more kind of aesthetic, just kind of how it sounds.
Well, from a singing perspective, it's much easier to sing worlds instead of works.
Works.
Because on that K, you have to, it's a different sound.
And I think rolling sounds better than mighty when it's
Oh, I
sung.
do too.
Yeah.
It kind of rolls off.
It rolls off the tongue, does it not? Indeed, yeah.
And it's descriptive. I think
Mhm.
it's, you hear a rolling thunder.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
Hear it.
It paints it,
Yeah.
paints the picture even more. So you'll see those little asterisks sometimes in some hymns, in other hymnals, like other denominations, like their hymnal publishing office might kind of do that every once in a while. Sometimes they get the hymn writer's permission, sometimes they just do it and they just make the note at the bottom. But like we talked about in the last few weeks, especially the early days of hymn writing was kind of loosey-goosey on what words kind of ended up with what tunes. And so just something to note whenever you see asterisks like that. So always read the fine print in both hymns and in contracts to see what kind of information is down there.
Stuart?
Yeah.
You may have covered this in the couple weeks that I wasn't able to be here, but the writer, were they compensated somehow? How does that whole commercial aspect of it work?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It would be different today than it was like when Fanny Crosby was writing 150 years ago. So I know today what happens is that, I don't know if these letters are down here. So the letters CCLI, you might see those letters, and if you open any of our Sunday bulletins, at the very bottom of our worship order, it's in little tiny print, because nobody cares except for copywriters. CCLI number, it's the license number, it's our permission to use this copyrighted material. So any church that wants to use copyrighted material, songs, they pay like a membership fee to CCLI. It's like a company nonprofit that then divvies up your fees. Like you report, these are the hymns we sang this month. And ideally, if a church is minding its P's and Q's, they pay for the CCLI copyright. I think it stands for like Common Copyright License, something, Incorporated. So you pay for that license, and then you fill out and you tell them these are the songs that we used, and then they funnel like whatever kind of percentage portion to whoever owns the copyright. So sometimes those writers are still living, or it might be their estate or whoever. If someone owns still that copyright, then they get a little money for their usage. For the older ones, my guess is that if a hymnal publisher was trying to be above board and everything, they would talk to the hymn writer or composer and say, hey, can we use your hymn? We'd like to pay you to put it in our hymnal. I don't think they did it 100% of the time. I think there was a lot of kind of loosey-goosey, like, oh, look at that, that's my hymn, what do you know? What a surprise. And with this one especially, it just keeps getting translated. Like different people kind of keep evolving the story and updating it. So it's kind of different in different eras. But like Fanny Crosby from last week, she was so well known that hymnal companies would come and say, can we pay you to write a hymn or pay you to include your hymns in our hymnal? So it kind of depends on how above board they were being done. And these days, not every church kind of, follows all the little P's and Q's details. You might think, well, who's going to know? There isn't any like copyright police that are undercover in a church and, going to say, oh, you didn't
I
follow.
might be the copy.
You could be, yeah, it could be one of you here. Yeah, undercover copywriter would be a great TV show. Yeah, especially for smaller churches. No hymnal company, no copyright owner is going to care if really lovely backwoods Baptist church is singing hymns. It doesn't really matter. It's kind of like if it's a big operation church on television. Then they would definitely be doing everything right. They don't want to get caught with like kind of a copyright kind of lawsuit or a fee. It would probably just be a fee if a church was discovered that they were kind of broadcasting without use.
Would the publisher have compensated whoever they used in their,
Yeah.
composers' hymns went in it?
Yeah.
To the extent they could?
Yeah. When I was working for the publishing company as the editor of the Sunday school curriculum, if I ever wanted to quote a hymn, like, here's your handout for this lesson, it's the lyrics to How Great Thou Art. I had to go to like the president of my publishing company, and he had to open the hymnal, look at the fine print and see, does anybody own the copyright of this song? We just have to contact, their personal marketing department or something and get permission to use their words. Because if it is under copyright, then you're supposed to get permission. Yeah.
When we hear that song sung, how does it make us feel?
Yeah, good question. How does it make you feel?
It's like a lot of good songs,
Yeah,
but it's an inspirational moment when you hear somebody sing that and do it really well.
mm-hmm,
And it's just like, wow,
yeah,
it makes you feel good, makes you.
Very spiritual.
do what?
spiritual,
Very spiritual, yes.
mhm, yeah.
It is just, and other songs are great, but that one to me just jumps out, it just
Yeah.
grabs you.
Yeah.
Which in another
I would
world.
say empowering.
Yeah.
It just makes you kind of stand up a little straighter and praise a little louder.
For me, it does.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm glad you said that because this is a very popular hymn now. So one of the running themes that we've noticed studying hymns and where they came from and when they came from is that whenever a hymn is written, whatever the decade or the century, older people at that time don't like it because it's new and not what they're used to. But younger people at that time do like it for the same reasons, because it's new and not what they're used to. But then, as decades go by, those younger people grow into older people, so then more new hymns get written, and guess what? They don't like those new hymns because it's not what they were used to. And that was the case for every hymn that was written before any of us were ever born. It was like the quote I read a few weeks ago from Basil Manley in the 1890s, who said that these new praise songs that young people like weren't as good as the classic hymns. They didn't have as much substance. So in terms of like, is a hymn good? It's all based on personal preference. And it's okay to have personal preference. It's okay to have favorites. I like this one. You like that one? That's okay. It's okay to have personal preference. Everybody thinks that whatever was around when they were a kid is the best of that thing. Whatever generation or age they are, the stuff that was around when they were a kid is the best thing. That's what everybody thinks. No one's more right than anybody else. We just all think that. And so naturally, as we get older, I include myself, we reject things that are new, we reject changes, we reject any kind of improvement. It's the young folk that make the changes, that write the new stuff. Carl Boberg was in his 20s when he wrote the original poem. Stuart Hine was in his 20s and 30s when he wrote How Great Thou Art. We need the new folks and new generations to keep writing new hymns so that one day they can be classics as well.
This song got a surge in popularity with George Beverly Shea.
Yeah.
Now that he's gone, it wasn't sung quite so much until Carrie Underwood sung it on American Idol, and then everybody was singing it.
Oh, really? Oh, see, if you can get somebody young and cool like Carrie Underwood to sing it, then it's got that cool stamp of approval. Yeah, it kind of gets renewed for another generation. Oh, good, good.
I was just looking at that, and she really sings it.
Oh, good.
She does a great job.
Oh, lovely. Well, then later on, go back, look at Carrie Underwood singing this on American Idol and Elvis as well, for sure. And enjoy both. Enjoy both. So here's, for example, in 1985, and remember our timeline that this hymn kind of hit our shores in the mid-late 50s. So in 1985, the Methodist Church wanted to put out a new hymnal. So they took a survey of the hymns that people like and wanted to include or not. How Great Thou Art was number one in two different categories. It was number one in the hymn backed by the most people to include in a new hymnal. It was also number one in the hymn backed by the most people to drop from the hymnal. Isn't that crazy? And so if you think about like in 1985, kind of the older folks in the Methodist Church at that time would have grown up before How Great Thou Art was written. And so they considered it new, not like the classic stuff. But the people who had kind of grown up and were young or middle-aged adults in 1985, they would have always known How Great Thou Art and said, oh, this is a great song. We should definitely include it. So again, you can see the different preferences in the generational divide. In 2001, Christianity Today magazine did a survey of people's favorite hymns of all time, and by that point, How Great Thou Art was firmly established across the board. It came in second, only after Amazing Grace, as people's favorite hymns of all time. So that was in the U.S. In the United Kingdom, in England, 2019, the BBC News did a big survey in the United Kingdom of people's favorite hymns. Again, How Great Thou Art was second, coming in behind number one, a hymn I had never ever heard of, because I'm not British. It's called Jerusalem, or And Did Those Feet in Ancient Time. Anybody? And Did Those Feet in Ancient Time? I looked it up. I listened to some lovely YouTube videos of choir singing it. Never, ever heard of it. But in 2019, that was the most loved hymn in England.
Is it inspirational? Is it motivational? Does it make you just jump out and live the way?
It was very British, you might say. And I didn't look up that hymn. I just kind of listened long enough to go, I've never heard of it. But it had kind of that old, regal, kind of classy, high church, kind of English, British kind of sound to it.
What was the name again?
Jerusalem, or you might see its first line, And Did Those Feet in Ancient Time.
And did those feet.
In ancient time.
F-E-E-T?
Yes, like, it talks about like, and did those feet in ancient time like walk into Jerusalem or something. I think it's singing about maybe Jesus walking into Jerusalem. I was just taken aback by this hymn I'd never ever heard of. And it was number one. It was their most loved. And yet, How Great Thou Art came in at number 2. So that was in 2019 in the United Kingdom. Here in 2019, the Hymn Society of the US and Canada did a March Madness style bracket to try and pick people's favorite hymns. So Brian, could you give handouts of this handout to everybody? This is just a fun article in 2019 talking about how the Hymn Society of the US and Canada did this March Madness style bracket. And it's kind of hard to read some of the titles in some of the dark chart, but I'll fast forward to the end. Again, How Great Thou Art came in second, only under Holy, Holy, Holy. So I thought that was very interesting.
That's thunder.
It was thunder. I went perfect. What a perfect moment to sing How Great Thou Art, the Rolling Thunder. Oh my gosh. That could not have been better timed. So if you look on the back, this one's in color, those are in black and white, you'll see that they organize the hymns into different divisions, kind of make it fun, like the NCAA March Madness. The refrain division are hymns that have refrains and choruses. The strophic division, I had to look up that word. Strophic is when every verse is totally unique and there's no refrain or chorus. Some hymns are more chants and cyclical, and they kind of repeat a lot of their words. So there is a chant and cyclical division, and then there was a staff picks division. The Hymn Society and CCLI had their staff picks. So you can kind of have some fun looking at how their brackets ended up. I couldn't find what the other 2 hymns in the semifinals were, but I could find all the other ones. Thank you very much. So I just thought it was neat to kind of continue tracking the development and the evolution of this hymn as it gained in popularity to be pretty firmly the second most loved hymn over the last 25 years, both in the US and in the United Kingdom. Okay, so let's jump into it. Let's really read all the words. So, I'll read the first stanza in chorus, and I want you to be thinking, think about Carl Boberg writing this poem, when he was outside walking back from preaching in a nearby village in a storm. Think about Stuart Hine, who was a missionary out in the Carpathian Mountains of Eastern Europe. What did it mean to them? And what does it mean to you? Just think about these words. Let these words roll over you and think about what they mean. O Lord my God, when I, in awesome wonder, consider all the worlds thy hands have made, I see the stars, I hear the rolling thunder, thy power throughout the universe displayed. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art! How great thou art! Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art! How great thou art! So what did that verse mean? What does it mean to you? What might it have meant to others over the years?
The wonder of creation.
Mm-hmm.
And the lovely world we live in.
Yeah, the wonder of creation, the awesome wonder.
Awesome wonder.
Yeah, filled with awe. Mhm. And neat that this first verse, in both of its editions by both writers, was inspired by a thunderstorm. I mean, if I was caught in a thunderstorm and wrote a poem, I would go, oh no, I'm scared, I'm caught in a thunderstorm. Get me out of this thunderstorm. But they were inspired, they're filled with awe to celebrate God's awesome wonder, even in the thunder and God's power.
He paid tribute to lots of things made by God's hands, not anything made by man's.
Yes.
Oh, great.
To see what God has created and how all those things testify to God's greatness.
That we look at it today and just ignore.
Yeah. I remember when I mentioned this before, when I first moved here, I wondered, will there be some point that I won't look at the mountains and go, wow, look at those mountains. Those are so pretty. And, because I would do that every day. I get to drive in from Jupiter every day. And I don't do it as every day as I should. Some days I'm thinking about other stuff, worried about other stuff. But at least once or twice a week, especially when I'm going home, I'm going up 26. And you can see that big cross there at Flat Creek, and you can see, then I go, wow, look at this. I forgot those were there.
Sister, did this song come to mind last year when you were on your pilgrimage and there was thunder all around?
I am so glad.
Or were you doing the poem of, this is awful, I need help, give me help.
I'm scared, God, help me.
I did pray that. I certainly did. I'm very glad you asked that, Martha, because let me read verse 2, which sung in my head almost every day as I walked across Scotland. When through the woods and forest glades I wander and hear the birds sing sweetly in the trees, when I look down from lofty mountain grandeur and hear the brook and feel the gentle breeze, then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee, how great thou art. I totally thought of that exact verse every day walking in Scotland, because I would walk through these forest glades that were just like fairy tale forests. And I would wander through the woods, sometimes lost while I wandered, and hear the birds, and I would look down from mountains, and so many brooks, so many breezes, some more gentle or less gentle than others. But I definitely thought of that exact verse almost every day walking in Scotland. And again, it celebrates the beauty of creation that God's hands have made. So then the focus starts to shift a little bit in verse 3. And when I think that God, his Son, not sparing, sent him to die, I scarce can take it in, that on the cross, my burden gladly bearing, he bled and died to take away my sin. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee, how great thou art. What about that verse? Remember what the circumstance was that inspired Stuart Hine to put together that verse? It was when he would see people in the Eastern European villages deciding to follow Jesus. And so as a missionary, he would have been telling the story of Jesus, practically every day. And when he saw people giving their lives over to God, that's what inspired him to write this stanza. Definitely an evangelistic kind of stanza. It's kind of a missionary's stanza for sure.
And we can look at nature and be in awe and admire it and be grateful for it, but if we don't accept his son, it was sin, it's all null and void.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
Yeah, and I like that this hymn connects those. That if we want to have eyes open wide, hearts open wide, if we want to appreciate the grand works of God, then it's not just saying how beautiful are the mountains, but also how amazing is the grace for me. That those things are connected, that appreciation of God's handiwork is connected to the acceptance of God's grace through Christ. Yeah.
The phrase, I scarce can take it in, that's so true.
Yeah,
For
yeah.
me.
Yeah. Isn't that a good phrase? It's him saying, I can hardly believe it. I can hardly believe it, that God was incarnate in person and that God's Son was allowed to die. I can scarcely believe it. It's so amazing. So then verse 4, when Christ shall come with shout of acclamation and take me home, what joy shall fill my heart? Then I shall bow in humble adoration and there proclaim, my God, how great thou art. It's another lovely stanza. What kind of feelings does that give to you? Or mindset, perhaps?
I mean, there's a lot of hope in that.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know what's coming.
Yeah, hope. Hope that all the world isn't just what we can touch, or that what happens to us while we're here in these bodies. Yeah, an eternal hope. Yeah.
And a humility.
A humility. Yeah. And again, I think that connects really wonderfully to the first two verses as well. When I, in awesome wonder, I mean, you can't have awesome wonder if you're not humble. I scarce can take it in. I just don't believe it. Mm-hmm. And remember that Stuart Hine put together that fourth stanza when he was ministering to refugees who had fled Eastern Europe during World War II, and their earthly home they couldn't go back to anymore. And so he was, as a missionary on his home shores, trying to comfort them, trying to help give them some hope. I wonder if he talked about that a lot with them, but he certainly thought about it as he looked at these refugees who had nothing. They had to flee and they came and they had nothing. Well, let's think about some Bible verses as we conclude tonight. In this white hymnal, every hymn has one Bible verse that's connected to it. Those were usually chosen by this hymnal's editors. In our newer Baptist hymnal upstairs, the verses aren't on the hymn pages, but there is a scripture verse index in the back of the green hymnal upstairs. So you can look up like John 3:16 and you can see like 5 different hymns might be connected to it. So maybe that's why the newer hymnal editors want to do it that way, because some verses can be connected to a lot of hymns, just because of the message is similar. This hymnal's editors did choose Deuteronomy 33:26, there is none like unto God, which fits very closely. There weren't any other specific Bible verses that were attached to this hymn by the hymn writers and composers themselves, but I did think of a few Bible verses that echo this hymn, or a few Bible verses that are echoed, their meaning is echoed by this hymn. So like stanza 1, talking about God's grace, God's greatness in creation, and I'm just going to rattle some of these off. If you want to jot them down, since the hour draws nigh, I'll go ahead and I'll read them off, and if you want to write them down, you can. But as always, our Bible study video will be posted on YouTube, so if you want to go back and kind of listen and jot down later, that's fine. So for stanza 1, I thought of Psalm 19:1, the heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of his hands. In Psalm 104:24, O Lord, how manifold are your works, in wisdom you have made them all. Sort of good celebration of that awesome wonder. For stanza 2, on how creation points to God's presence there in it, I thought of Psalm 96:11 and 12. Let the heavens rejoice, let the earth be glad, let the sea resound and all that is in it. Let the fields be jubilant and everything in them. Let all the trees of the forest sing for joy. And Isaiah 55:12. You will go out in joy and be led forth in peace. The mountains and hills will burst into song before you, and all the trees of the field will clap their hands. So definitely good verses that talk about creation itself praising God, and there being joy in the midst of creation itself that we can have, and that even the very trees can have. For stanza 3, about Christ's sacrificial love, I, of course, thought of John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever should believe in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. That one definitely jumped out. Also, 1 Peter 2:24, he himself, Christ, bore our sins in his body on the cross, so that we might die to sins and live for righteousness. By his wounds you have been healed. And then for the chorus, stanza 4. Stanza 4 about Jesus coming back and eternal hope. 1 Thessalonians 4:16 through 17. For the Lord himself will come down from heaven with a loud command, with the voice of the archangel and the trumpet call of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. After that, we who are still alive and are left will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so we will be with the Lord forever. So good eternal hope. And then finally, for the chorus, I thought of Psalm 145:3, great is the Lord and greatly to be praised. How great thou art. Simple verse for a simple yet profound message that this hymn carries. Let this hymn be a soundtrack for your nature walks this week. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord.